Hi, this is Doug Howard with Growth Team Strategies, here with another episode of Selling the Dream. And I'm here with Kathi Fleck, one of our senior consultants that has certainly been in the role of building a business and selling a business. Kathi, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm good. So today we're going to talk about how do you know when you're ready to sell? For some people, I hear them say, way beyond or way before the time when they get ready to sell, I got to get out of here. I should be retired, especially when their plans get kind of prolonged beyond maybe some target they had, like an age they wanted to retire or what have you. Others, it seems like, they'd like to move on to something else. There's something they'd really like to get to. For others, it's a little bit harder, right? It's like, the business is running its course. They know they have to separate at some point, but it's not really something they're as desiring to do. So, Kathi, tell me a little bit about, like, how did you know when you were ready to sell? What were some of the things that kind of made you put a time frame on it? And how did that relate to sort of the highs and lows of the business?
Well, I think I had a 3-year plan, and that started probably around 2017 or so.
Okay.
And knowing that that wasn't the right time to sell, but I explored it with getting the valuation from the broker, and then knowing that that wasn't the right time. So, well, let's take a look at it in 2019. That still wasn't the right time. And then January of 2020, of course, did not know we were running into COVID, but that was the right time.
Right.
So when I spoke with the broker again, they said, yes, let's just do a little recap of where we're at since we had already done a major valuation. And then I was comfortable with the numbers that we were expecting to sell it at or for. And then I thought, okay, let's just go with it. But I think a lot of people, business owners, don't really think about selling their business. Can they sell it? They're just in it. They may have started it when they were much younger. And then all of a sudden they're thinking, well, gee, I'm going to get close to retirement. Now what will I do? And so I've talked to several people just because they know I've sold my business, and everybody has different approaches. I'd like to sell it to my staff, but maybe their staff isn't an entrepreneur or ready to pick up the business, or how are they going to handle the financial part? So I just think that people have a lot of different perspectives on it, and they should really explore, first of all, if they are going to sell it, and then get some help on what's the best approach for them.
Yeah. Well, I think statistics show that when people are selling a business and they're moving on to something else they want to do, there's a purpose for it, they're much more satisfied a couple of years after the sale of the business than those folks that kind of just get to a certain point where they feel like they need to get out of the business, or maybe some other circumstance like economics or health or whatever, gets in the way. And so, I think if someone's moving on to travel, or to maybe even pursue a different kind of business opportunity, or, anything from, I know for me, it's like, well, I never really thought much about retirement, but I, more and more I'm enjoying time with grandkids and things like that. And it's like, well, maybe if there was something other, some other thing to do, to pursue, then that would be a big part of it. The other thing I think is important for people, though, is that sometimes circumstances dictate maybe not what we would first choose. And so it's important to get these things sellable, whether or not we're ready to sell right at the moment, too. And I'm going to go back, Kathi, to something that you said to me when we were working together. So I don't even know if you remember this, but we were talking about, fairly early on, putting together a plan, and, how your role you'd be starting to hand things off and wind things down. And, with each year, you'd have less things you were day-to-day responsible for. But by the same token, the profitability of the business would be growing. And at one point, it was more of an offhand conversation, but so, at some point, you could be down to like 20 hours a week and making more money than you're making right now. And you said, it may have been half jokingly, but, well, if that was the case, I might not want to leave, right? And so it always stuck with me. And it's like, well, here's the cool thing about being the business owner. You don't have to leave, right?
Right.
But what you end up with is a couple of good options, right? And so not knowing how to predict the future, it's like, well, if it could go this way or the other, but either way, we're in a good position because we've thought these things through,
Right.
and we've developed the company. I think that's really important. And so, what about just in terms of, as things were getting closer and you're ready to sell? I mean, then you have to kind of think about like, okay, well, what do I do now? Right.
Yeah, and I think I didn't really put a lot of emphasis into what would I do afterwards, but I know it is a whole psychological and emotional transition because you're so much of all of those who are entrepreneurs, we put so much of ourselves into the business. Of course, it's very time consuming as well, and a lot of other activities may be put on hold. So I didn't really think about what was I going to do when I sold. And there was a transition. Now it's been 2 years since I sold
Mm.
the business, but it was a transition. And for a while there, it was a little quieter than I would like. But I think, I am pretty active and I have a lot of different hobbies. So it's easier for me to then transition into those. Of course, then continuing to work with you and help other business owners grow or sell their businesses is helpful to me too. So it's an area I like to put my time into. But
Yeah.
it does require that transition, just like anything else. Everybody goes through different life transitions, and it is a big one.
Yeah. It was funny for me when I had my business, I had been in the business for about 21 years. I had owned it for about 17, but it was not a business that I particularly sought out to be involved with. I wasn't an accountant. I owned an accounting firm. It was a great opportunity to buy it, but I didn't really enjoy the tax season and the data security and all those things that went along with it. And for me, there was a bit of a revelation that said, at the time, I think I was, 42 or 43 or something like that. Was it that long ago? No, maybe I was older than that. But I was kind of getting to that point, like if I was going to do one more thing, like one more significant thing, like I needed to do something, or this was just going to be where I was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
riding out the remainder of my career. And so I think for me it was like, well, this timing may be good
Mm-hmm.
in that regard. So we are certified in the Value Builder program, and that program, one of the tools that program has is a Value Builder score that looks at the sellability of the business and how to make it more sellable. But there's another tool that it has called the pre-score, which is kind of interesting. And basically what it is it's a assessment that a business owner can do just to see how ready they are personally to be thinking about selling the business.
Mm-hmm.
Like what would they go do? How would they spend their time? And kind of where that's going to leave them in that journey. And sometimes we do the pre-score even before we get to some of the other things, because it really is important to realize, am I really ready for this? Right.
Mm-hmm.
You
I've
know?
talked to several business owners that I'm friends with, and two gentlemen I'm thinking of, both wanting to sell their businesses, and one has all kinds of activities that he wants to be involved in when he sells.
Yeah.
He's also thinking maybe of staying on and selling it to the his employees and have a partial hand in the business. The other one said to me, "Well, I do want to sell in about 3 to 5 years, but I don't know what I would do. I don't have any other activities, so it might be a little bit less enticing for him to even start selling the business."
Yeah.
But I think the big point that you made is to get your business ready. Not only can you have a very successful and profitable business and not have to worry about so many of the headaches that go with it, but you're also putting yourself in a position that you could sell if you want to, or
Yeah.
you could cut back if you want to. You have a lot more control, I think, over um, your future by
Yeah.
making sure that everything is aligned correctly.
Well, and that's a really interesting point you make there, Kathy, because I've had people that have thought about selling the business and then they think, well, what would I do? And then they end up sort of keeping a piece of the business,
Hmm.
right? So, for instance, we've had some people that have done new home construction and remodeling, and they're ready to be out of the remodeling business. There's a whole enterprise that goes along with it, but they have these trade contractors, they have these relationships. And I've had some say, but you know what? I'm going to keep the new home construction piece and maybe I'll build 2 homes a year or something like that, right? Continue to keep that revenue source, continue to keep some level of activity. I've had other people that said, listen, I'm a chef, I like to cook, I'm going to sell the restaurant, but I might do something with the catering piece, or I might
Mm-hmm.
do something with some other. So sometimes it's not all or nothing, right?
Right.
Sometimes it
Right.
can be like, well, I'd like to keep this portion of the business. We've had other people that, in the process of, uh, purchasing commercial property to house their business, building, maybe their business takes up half of it, and they may sell that business and they still may own that building. And
Right.
I've had some others that ended up with, 2 or 3 shopping centers and things like that. And it's like, well, they kind of just morphed into a different kind of enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
even though it was a spinoff from what they had done before,
I
and
think
then I
there's
think,
a lot more opportunities when things are aligned within your business. And another gentleman I met out in California who has a remodeling business was really hoping to pass it down to his son, and his son started getting involved, but did not have the maturity, was not anywhere near ready to even start taking over. So the owner decides, well, things are running pretty well. I'm just going to take extended vacations and do what I want and still keep the business and let my son grow into it. I'm not going to worry about it so much and see that think that I have to sell it. So I think it just gives so many more opportunities to business owners when things are aligned and your business is running smoothly and you can make the decisions versus them making them for you.
yeah, I think the real danger is when people haven't planned ahead and then they determine they need to sell.
Right.
And then they almost
Exactly.
get claustrophobic in the business, right? It's like, I've got
Mm-hmm.
to get out. It starts to change the way they operate the business. It starts to
Mm-hmm.
change their perspective on what they'll take in terms of a price for the business. They don't, and so things start happening in a way that they miss that opportunity to kind of
Right.
finish strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see that also with folks that when they've had a buyer that looks like they are going to be the buyer and they get pretty far down the path and the deal falls through, it's almost like they don't have the energy or the
I
drive
know.
or the
Yeah.
time frame to go back and say, let's do this over again,
Yeah.
you know?
It's
And
very
so,
emotionally draining to have to go through that again or to realize that the sale is not going to go through and now what?
right, right. It's like when your third fiance leaves you at the altar, you sit there and say, well, you know, is this really a path I'm ready to go down one more time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I think that would be
um,
tough.
yeah. So, but it's that kind of drain. But I think as things go forward, people should be looking at it and saying, okay, we've got to line up the right, conditions for the business to sell, but also the right conditions for me as the business owner to be ready to sell, to be ready
Right.
to move
Right.
on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that we're having lots of fun with in our organization is that, not that it was really initially by design, but we've ended up creating an organization of folks that have basically had this experience. They've
Yeah.
owned a business, they've grown the business, they've sold it successfully, too young to retire, not necessarily, needing the job to be able to do some of the things they want to do, but also an opportunity to help some other folks along the
Mm-hmm.
way. And that's pretty exciting. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's I think whether you leave public office or you leave the business or whatever, sort of that next iteration of what do you do with your life,
Mm-hmm.
are some of the best stories of what people have had. There.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's just another chapter, but I think people need to be ready for
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so too. I think the better they plan, the better the opportunities they have.
it. Absolutely. Well, thank God we did it correctly, so that's good. So
It
now
ended up
hopefully,
okay.
yeah. So hopefully we'll just help steer some folks in that direction. But
Yes.
anyhow, well, Kathi, thanks for your insights. I think it was particularly relevant. I think if people are out there listening and they're kind of in that mode, it's like you got to wrap your head around this.
Mm-hmm.
That's something you really want to be thinking about. So no, this I think is a good topic. I think we'll have more to say about this as we go forward.
Yes.
All right. Well, selling the dream. We will be back again soon, talking about more things business owners should be thinking about if they want to get to the point of being able to have that sellable business. So, Kathi, thanks again for being part of the organization and part of the podcast. Appreciate you being here.
I always enjoy it. Thanks.
All right. All right. Well, that's it for today. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.